Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back. We took a week off for Bioactive Live, but we're here again Friday night, 9 a.m., 9 p.m. Eastern.
I wish
Uh,
9 a.m. It'd be a lot
yeah,
easier.
might might be a
Yeah.
little bit tougher to get people to tune in, but we're back. Friday that we try to do every single Friday. Last week was our kind of a leap week where we just decided to spend time with our families and enjoy the hangover, so to speak, of the holiday. So thanks for everyone's patience and waiting another week, but we're glad to have you guys back here. And this week we're gonna jump into some ways that you can support those plants that you have growing out in the garden. This is kind of a painful time for a lot of people because it's a lot of sit back and wait, right? And people are spinning their wheels thinking of things they can do to actually support the plants, and there is a fine balance between doing nothing and doing too much. And you certainly don't want to do too much because at the end of the day, nature is doing the hard work. We're just steering these things for our space or so that we can be more effective with what we're working with. So that's the essence of tonight's conversation. And we hope that you guys can drop some questions in either on Instagram or here on YouTube, where the best stream is possible. So, yeah, with that, man, Kev, I saw you. We talked about this previously, but kind of just to go right off the bat, we lost Kevin. Never mind. Let's take a step back then until we get Kevin back. I think that the best place to set yourself up for success in veg, and I don't think that anybody's going to disagree with this, but it's going through a strong seedling period, right? It's starting out strong out the gate, popping your seeds, and getting those seedlings so that they aren't dealing with that crazy stretch, so that they're happy, they're balanced between moisture levels, not being too dry, not being too wet. Um, and Brian said it before, but this does boil down a lot to lighting with your seedlings. So maybe Brian, if you want to kick it off and kind of go through your lessons learned on starting with seeds, because it seems like you've got some experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you see a lot of the early mistakes with cannabis. People are posting up. We were right before we came on here. We were talking about pheno hunting, but if you're pheno hunting without like the the best of what you know, and it's always okay. Like your skill set is whatever it is at that time. So if you're pheno hunting and you like, I started out with an aquaponic style, like in my opinion, that's kind of a horrible way to pheno hunt and try to see expressions and stuff. But whatever, man. We were trying to set up the best environment. So people that are willing to sit around and watch these kind of shows, you guys are nerds about this. So in my opinion, starting from day one, right? We want to make sure that these ladies, we always joked around, we want big, strong ladies. We want these ladies to go to Wimbledon. We want the Serena and Venus style cannabis girls. And when they're off into veg is when we can kind of control these things. So we need to back that up a little bit and make sure that all of our plants are starting from, especially when we're pheno hunting from seed, are starting out with kind of a leg up, if you will, where we're focused on them almost as like an infant. And so there should be no real reason, in my opinion, why you're letting them get laggy and loose. A lot of them are are falling over. So an easy way to fix this is to get a simple, probably $50, $75 T5 light. Use that as your seedling light, your pheno hunting light. Sometimes I would even take two of the bulbs out, to be honest. I get the four and then take two of the bulbs out so I have a bigger footprint. Just get that relatively close to those seedlings. Let them grow up to a healthy style without having that stretch. And then from there, in my opinion, if you're really running them pretty heavy in a decently sized bedroom, from there everything seems to kind of just take hold, and you don't have to worry about the stretch anymore unless you're running with kind of more exotic genetics. But from kind of like a factory standpoint, those seedlings should be coming out as healthy as possible so that you can pick and choose from those seedlings what you want to run with. And if you just have a bunch of ones that are very laggy, you're not going to get that full expression, in my opinion. from day one. And that was kind of the premise of this show, is especially when we were getting into this stuff, we're thinking about moving into really finding certain things with our cannabis grows, taking this to the next level and finding ways to improve the seed growth. I think is kind of like that playbook or building block, if you will, because without that, then we can't go into veg and really crush it. And then once they get into flower, that's why we always use that analogy. Those girls are off and doing their own thing. They're grown by now. And so me as the father of this, you guys, however you look at your grows, when I go and I see my ladies, I can't influence what they're doing anymore. So I've had to have already set in like good boundaries, good standards. I want these girls to have good morals, growing healthy plants, so that I don't have to really focus on some of the negativity stuff. And if the plants are as healthy as possible, I have noticed that the IPM pressures go down dramatically. Whether that is a placebo effect or not, I guess is part of that. But I think when everybody is happier and healthier and eating, only whole foods type products for plants, it does seem like it's a lot easier to grow in a healthy system. And I would say, we should throw it over to Kevin to talk about that more on a heavier basis of the pheno hunts.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. My phone dropped me off outside, so I had to come inside. I was going to look at some of the humongous plants I've got going on back outside. I've got an 11 footer and a 12 footer. I got a couple 11 footers, but a single 12 footer. They're huge. And like Mark was saying, they started off manicured for me. Like I was taking care of it. Like Brian was saying, specific things to look for and how to take care of it. He's babying the plant, just trying to make sure it's good and healthy, just like you would your own child. Outside, it's the same thing, man. I always manicure not too soon. Don't get me wrong. I want the cotyledons. I want the singles, the threes, the fives, the sevens. I want the plant to put on fan leaves until it stops putting more fingers on. I've had Cherry Grande go to 13 at about node, 20, something like that. And then it went back down to 9, and it kind of stayed at 9. But it hit one spot, just boom, putting out these beautiful fan leaves. But those fan leaves are huge, and they take up nutrient also. And if they're being blocked by other branches and they're just not getting a good amount of sun, they're not helping. Take them off. Even if they're beautiful and healthy, and I'm talking about outside growing in my backyard, this is how I do it. I take them off because I want my soil covered, and I'm using the plant basically as a tool to keep my soil going and healthy. And so those big fan leaves are perfect to keep the root area, above the root area, nice and moist. It's protected from the heat and the sun. Those leaves are big and thick. Cover them with a little grass, something like that. Man, you'll have moisture under there for a long time. And for me, it's better for the plant to remove stuff, prune it back, because it's like a racehorse. It wants to take off as hard as it can. And that's not always the best plan, right? You're going to run out eventually. Like you've seen cannabis plants that get so big, they start to bring on fungus and they get affected because it's just too bushy and jungly, too much humidity in close to the main meristem. And it just becomes a problem. And because a cannabis plant, like basically other plants, well, most other plants, they want to grow because they're trying to reproduce in some way. And so they're going to just overdo it. And so you got to prune them back a little bit, put them in control a little bit, right? Hold them back and tear off all that inside stuff. And they'll start to reach out more, right? They're like, I got to put on a few more fan leaves now. And I always notice, the tips just really start to bulge out a little more. The fan leaf size starts to get bigger quicker. And so I like to keep them cleaned up. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. So just to take a step back, I definitely want to get into pruning and kind of moving into like the teens and you're way past the teen stage. I feel like I'm definitely past the teen stage now, but I think a good question to go over for a lot of people is, when do you start your seeds? What lighting do you use on your seeds? Because I think that those two things are going to be really important for people to understand, because a lot of with farming, especially with natural farming, is planning. So Kev, like you're in Oklahoma, you guys obviously have an earlier start to your season, and just for reference, we can safely plant seeds about mid-June here. That's what Zone 7 says. So Um, uh, Kevin, you can probably plant sooner than that, but like when are you starting your seeds in relation, and how do you get that little process kind of kicked off?
Yeah. So this is something that's always fun to learn, and I still need to learn more of it. And it's the planting of seed throughout the seasons, because you can plant multiple seeds throughout the season. Again, depending on your zone. In my zone, I can get a couple of harvests in on a few things if you know what to plant, when to plant, stuff like that. So the first thing always goes down in my garden are potatoes and onions. Those would be the first thing I actually stick in the ground with my hands and get them positioned and all that. Then the next thing I scatter out is basically a cover crop that's edible. It's always things that I could eat, but it's always vegetables, not just clover, and things like that I'm not going to eat. Whatever the cover crop mixture I do, and basically, guys, my
Like
cover crop.
what? Like what are you doing this year, Kev? Just sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, so this year I just went to the store. Last year I bought connoisseur crop cover. I think a lot of people have used that off Amazon, and it's good. It's thick and bushy. I've used Bokashi Earthworks crop cover. It was fantastic. Had red clover in it, and it was beautiful. The red clover puts on a real pretty red, bright red, reflective color on it, and it grows out here in the fields in Oklahoma. But I went to the store. I went to Sutherland's in my town, and I grabbed individual seed packs. Those individual seed packs are about $2 to $4, depending on what you get. But I got like turnips, I got cabbages, kales, spinaches, mustard greens, lettuces, things like that, broccoli, and just mixed my own, and just kind of spread it out. It doesn't take a lot of seed, because remember, that crop cover is going to get big soon. You don't need seed covering the ground. You need seed dispersed throughout, and let those things get big and bushy, and eat what's there, and then chop and drop the rest.
And just a side thought. So I love your cover crop. So one thing, if you're looking for like a simplified blend, it's called the Good Bug Blend, and I can't remember. I think it's on growingorganic.com. But it's got a mixture of carrots, turnips, daikon radish, stuff like that. It's not all edible, but it's also focused towards bringing it's low growing, bringing in beneficial ground bugs and other beneficial insects and organisms. But the side thought is that I've been growing a hell of a lot of perennial arugula. Um, and I've noticed that nothing touches the arugula. It's so pungent. It's delicious to eat when you get it early enough. But there's nothing chomping on it at all. It's not a good edible lettuce type plant. So
Spicy.
yeah, to me that's kind of a good plant to grow around the base of your cannabis, because
Yeah.
shit's gonna come on that, eat it, and be like, "Fuck this place, I'm out." And I've had a great success with it this year. It's perennial, so it comes back every year as long as you keep that root intact. You're not rooting it. So just something to check out. You can get seeds online of that, and you can get them locally too. So
Yeah.
sorry. Anyways, Kev. Yeah. So back to you. Now you've planted your edible covers. Moving into so have you started your cannabis seeds indoors already? Like, like, is that something you begin in like a January, February, basically, where you start doing your little selection process indoors?
So it's different so for summertime, let's say. For summertime, what I'm going to do is there's a couple of things that I do, but really the idea is that I broadcast a lot because I breed. I have a lot of seeds, and so I kind of will broadcast 100 seeds, 200 seeds, and that's a lot for a 10 by 5 little plot. But that doesn't mean I'm keeping all 100. I kind of like to let them all grow up. I start to look at node spacing. I start to look how fast are they putting fingers on the leaves. Are they going 3, 3, 3, 5, 5, 5, or are they going 3, 5, 7, 7, 9, 11? That's the one. So you just start selecting just based on visuals, as that's all you can do at the beginning when you're, go like Brian was saying for breeding. That's what I'm looking at. And so I'll get them cleared out to about 20 plants in a plot like that and let them start to grow. There'll be some that start to outgrow others, and I'll see, okay, this plant just won't make it in 4 months. It'll be covered up. Rip those out, and you start to kind of get the big ones, and you have them nice and spaced out. Now, not everybody can do that because not everybody breeds their own seeds. Now, on the indoor stuff, I don't do it like that. I go selecting, and I usually will pop like 100 seeds, but guys, I am possibly the worst seed popper in the world. I get terrible results. And I do all kinds of methods. And guys, it's kind of like maybe I don't, I don't, I do care, but it's not a worry for me because I'm like, I'll just pop more seeds. But I'll pop 100 seeds and start looking who popped first, right? And who's cotyledon popped out and it's not staying closed and mangled and weird looking. You can see from the seed. Again, it's just visuals, all you can go by.
Yeah.
Well, I'll choose the the best 20 seeds that pop the soonest, and I'll plant those, and the rest just get chunked.
So it's crazy because I mean, like you can do that here in Michigan for sure, but it's risky, obviously, because I mean, if you're popping a bunch of regular seeds, you obviously have to be on your game, especially outdoors on identifying the sex. If you're looking to just grow a female, if you're not looking for like an open pollination project,
Yeah,
so
you might get one.
it can be risky, but you're spoiled because you just have bundles of fem seeds too. So if you don't want to deal with that, you're not dealing with it anyways. But so here in Michigan, I like to get a jump on it a little bit. So I'll start my seedlings indoors because A, I want to figure out if they're going to be females or males, but B, I want to get them up to like a gallon size
What
pot.
month? When do you start? What are you
Um,
talking, indoor or
I
outdoor?
I have before started them in like late January, which is way too early. It's way too early. Like I would start seeds no sooner than early March to have them in gallon buckets, completely hardened off, ready to rock and roll as like above teens. You know what I mean? That's how I get my jump, and then I usually plant like the first week of the first 2 weeks of June is when usually I'm dropping in. But for whatever reason, even if you're dropping in like the last week of June here, you're still gonna get if you have good sunlight and you got good soil and good conditions, you're still gonna get a 7 or 8 foot plant
Uh,
that's gonna drop 7,500 to 10,000 wet grams, which is huge. I mean, it's not like what you guys are growing. But anyways, to detract Brian, like what's the best way to pop seeds in your opinion indoors? I mean, I know how I do it, and I think we agree on the methodology. But like, what would you recommend is the best way for people that want to pop good seeds, avoid that stretch, have good strong stems, give them the best chance?
Yeah, I personally, in the early days, we would use the paper towel method. Then we kind of moved over to the shot glass method. This only works if you're a home grower, in my opinion, because otherwise you would need, at scale, this would be kind of silly. But having all these different little shot glasses, we would then use the little pipette, and we would use the full power product. And so just a little bit of that with some mineral water, we would let the cannabis seeds, some of them would start to sink, some of them would float, and then some of them would obviously start to sprout. And so we take those with you can buy these fancier eyebrow pluckers, and they have like more of like a cushion on them. I sometimes use them even for the isopods to this day. But using that, it's a little bit softer. And so we would pick up the seeds out of the shot glasses and then place them into a soil mix. With this soil mix, you want to go very light. A lot of the soil mixes that you would find even in the early days in a bag soil could potentially burn your plants. If you're brand new to this, there are seed soil mixes that you can purchase so that you don't kind of mess up in the first couple goes at this. After you've done it a couple of times, you'll see that it's really, I mean, this isn't, that's what I think Kevin was getting at when he says, I don't worry about it. I mean, once you've done it a few times, it's kind of like, you know where you're at. Everything's kind of moving in motion. But again, if we're talking like a pheno hunt standpoint, we want to be by the book. We want to have the best options. We want these not only girls to be great athletes, we want them to be exceptional athletes for us. We need this medicine to be next level. That's the whole point of doing these pheno hunts. And so once they start to take hold there, I've always invested a decent amount of money into the T5s to keep it very simple. And so it doesn't cost me a lot of money at home when I'm running these things. And so using the T5s allows me to have more money to spend a little bit on the genetics and run higher and higher genetics, have better flips, especially in the early days where we would go with like this dude out in California, Bog Genetics, and you were able to get some of these pink hues and these blue hues. Where I was growing up, you weren't able to get that stuff. To this day, it's probably pretty hard to get that kind of stuff. And so the only way to achieve that is to go through that process of being able to find these pheno hunts with the limited packs that you're going to have. And having the T5 on there, having it just above, I would say maybe an inch or two. I always would use my hand, but there's hardly any heat that comes off of that. You can use LEDs. I have seen obviously success with all of that, but if the point is to find success and to kind of be budget friendly, there's nothing wrong with using some of the what people would say is kind of older technology, especially when it comes to T5s. The bulbs are super cheap. It's just a tried and true method. From there, then I would invest my money into the technology. I would want to really have probably a state of the art system in veg and a state of the art system in flower if the budget allowed it. So you kind of just build the train, if you will. Make sure that you start off with a strong engine, and then you kind of put the cars on the back of it, and as things start to take off, you got a little more money in your pocket. Otherwise, if you kind of do it backwards, that's how we started. You're going to spend a ton of money. You're not going to find results. You're not going to know how to grow seeds. You're going to spend too much money on the things that don't really matter at first.
All right, so yeah, I agree with T5s for sure. I just think T5s are better for seedlings. Um, but so moving past seedlings, we're back kind of with Kevin here. Um, so we're defoliating now. What are the reasons why we're defoliating, right? Like there's certain, like when you look at a plant, you have a big ass plant in your backyard. There's goals, and you were hitting on them, Kevin, already. One of them for sure, like you were saying, is to take those fan leaves away from any bud sites, growth sites. Um, that was going to help to even out the canopy, because it's going to allow those to get sunlight to come up where they need to be and have a fighting chance, right?
Yeah.
And B, it also clears up the inside of the plant for proper airflow. So I think like people have apprehension about defoliation, and the fact of the matter is, and Kevin, you can probably attest to this. We were joking about it through text before this. You know, defoliate today and tomorrow, you're gonna have just as much growth. It's gonna be cranking, and you're gonna have more things to kind of take a look at. So there is a sweet spot though when I like to start defoliating, right, Kevin? Like I don't necessarily like to start defoliating too early. Kev, when are you starting your defoliation? Like, is there like a set point? You just get a feeling in your plums? Like, when do you start trimming leaves off and stuff?
Dude, I got a feeling in my plums. I watched that video 100 times one night, and I laughed just as hard 100 times, bro. That man is hilarious.
That bright bluish hue dancing,
I can feel it in my plums.
ready for
Okay,
market.
so when I grow indoor, I let my plants get going, and then probably 2 weeks before I go to veg, or sorry, 2 weeks before I flip to flower, I will do a heavy defoliation, because in 2 weeks there's going to be plenty of leaf back again, and then when it goes into flower, it's going to kick in even more. And so I'll do 2 weeks before flower. When flower hits, I'll defoliate on week 3, and I'll defoliate a ton of the inner stuff. I really try to leave big fan leaves on the outside, but pull every fan leaf off that's not being blocked by another fan leaf. Which means you've got about three big fan leaves at the top, and basically that's it. Everything else below that needs to be gone. All fan leaves gone. I recommend leave the bud sites for a while. Leave the bud nodes. Let some will grow out, some won't. And the ones that aren't growing out, rip them off. But you might get a nice bud on a couple of them. But you typically lollipop. I lollipop pretty good because I know that's a waste, and it's gonna hold moisture. It's gonna be a home for whatever wants to show up. And it's better to have that airflow and lack of moisture that all that material is already holding, besides what the environment's going to throw at you and the soil below is gonna throw at you. It just causes too much moisture in there, and those big buds on the outside block it. But week 3 of flower, I defoliate. Week 7, I rip it basically all off. I want no fan leaves. I want nothing. I just want to see those buds grow. Like, it's just, there's no more use. Those plants. I'm not scientific at all. I'm methods. That's it. I've done these methods and they're proven. So this is what I do. In week 7, I rip everything off. I want to see buds only. And I have just buds because I know I will lose bud, and I could lose it all if I got these big, fat, heavy fan leaves laying on each other. And you might have a dry bucket down low, but right here between these fan leaves, it's wet. And you're going to have all kinds of biology just thriving right there. And then poof, pull apart, and it's welcome season on the plants now. And so I have a kind of just a growing rule of no fan leaves ever touch. If fan leaves are touching, they're too big. Boom, off. They're taking up. Now they're taking space, and now they're causing problems because it's too aggressive. It's a healthy plant. That's a good thing. It's okay to rip off the fan leaf. But yeah, no fan leaves touch, because that's always causing problems.
Well said.
And then at the end of the cut, see, the good thing is at the end of harvest, you don't have to deal with all those fan leaves. You just cut them, turn them up, and it's over with, or freeze them, or whatever you're going to do. Go ahead, Mark.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, you're essentially jumping ahead a little bit in your harvest, because those families need to get bucked anyways. They're not going to do anything necessarily good for you if you're hanging the plant, or if you're washing it, putting it in a freezer. You're not going to want them regardless. So the biggest concern always is that mildew and bud rot and stuff like that. And you guys have prolifically wet fall time, don't you? And so do we here in Michigan. It's usually amazingly dry till about the end of August, maybe even into like September, and then by about late September it goes really wet. And you know it shouldn't be contentious at all what you're saying. Some people probably think it is contentious taking off every fan leaf. It shouldn't be.
Do your own thing.
Yeah, and do your own thing, exactly. But I couldn't agree more with that, because my biggest concern come October 1, where I might have 2 weeks left on some of these plants, is starting to see that white bullshit powdery mildew. It's the, you start losing. That's when you're kicking yourself for not lollipopping a little bit, like Kevin was saying, cleaning up the bottoms, cleaning out the innards, because it's too late at that point. Once it's there, it's going to start spreading, and you're going to start losing yield like worse. And then you're going to be chopping off delicious smelling nugs at that point. So I think good point, Kev.
Let me interject this here. This is no different than growing vegetables. And let's take the tomato, for example. If you've got a big, beautiful, bushy tomato plant, and it's got big lateral leaves coming off, and they're on the inside, and they're crossing each other, and it's just big and thick like that, that plant will put more into those big fan leaves than it will into its fruit. And so you trim those leaves up on a tomato plant. I mean, I lollipop tomato plants all the way to the top of the cage often. And all that below is just big old tomatoes growing on it. And that won't happen if I leave all that heavy foliage on there. It just doesn't have the juice to put into the foliage and into the fruit. And so all the stuff up top, guys, it's soaking up all the sun. That plant can handle it. you rip the whole bottom out, it's good. It's like, I'm fine. I got a whole huge canopy that I'm communicating with right here, you know, and all this down here doesn't do anything. It did at one time. At one point, it did. It was collecting. It was the canopy, but then whoop, it kept going up, and now it's not anymore. So remove it. And no, so it's the same thing. It's not like we're being specific to cannabis with this method. This lollipopping things, pruning fruit trees back. That's a very common thing that you need to do, because pear trees will just consume themselves with branches, you know, and you won't get anything. So cutting things back is a good idea. It's pruning. It's basic husbandry in the garden. You can't let things just go crazy if you're wanting them to produce some things. You know, you got to kind of keep them tamed down a little bit. So there you go.
Kev, I just thought this was an appropriate question we could throw in real quick. How about during veg, does defanning stimulate more growth? I say yes, but Kev, you can probably more eloquently answer that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty eloquently answered. Yes, you can. I think it does also, because
Well, think about topping. Just when you're in veg, right, and you want to get a bushier plant, you just top. You just
yep,
pluck. You can pluck that little top node off, and guaranteed you're gonna get 2 shoots out from underneath that spot, or sometimes even 4.
yep.
So yeah, definitely.
And that
And
plant will
that's
start
what
to
we're talking
choose.
about.
Yeah, that plant will start to choose a new branch to become the replace the apical meristem, right? That main center branch, because it wants one to be it wants a guarantee. So it's going to put up that one big one. It's like, all right, we're going here. We will always be good to go, but if we get that one big one up, you know. So even when you chop them all down, there'll be that one that often just shoots up, and it's like, that's what the plant knows to do. And so, yeah, when you prune it back, it starts to say, "Vroom, vroom, we got to do something." Yeah.
That's why doing it now before we start getting in, and it's hard to tell in outdoor when you get into that transition period. But it's coming up and it comes quick here. I don't know about you guys, but just as fast as the days get longer, they get shorter. So,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised, like when you start to see that plant really start to crank, right? You're getting 6-inch growth or a foot of growth a day. And you're entering into week 1, week 2, August. You're probably in transition period, and it's time to not necessarily stop defoliating, but it's time to start changing and reconsidering um, exactly what you're doing. Like you're probably not going to be doing. You're going to have wanted to do all your topping and kind of like steering already. You don't really want to start pinching branches at this point. You don't want to be tying things back. You don't want to be bending or doing anything like that, because it's gonna it what it does is, in my experience, is it fucks up. It starts to bush out lower growth to an extent that, because it's going through this immense growth period. So if you start pinching off top nodes and stuff like that, and you're trying to steer the plant at this point, you just start to get an unmanageable bush inside of the plant, because it's so confused at this point, but it's going to blow out wherever it can. So I try to avoid that, and that's why right now, we're in mid-July now. Now I'm really starting to defoliate, really starting to try to get those branches to come up, get away, keep them away from each other, take out the little inner branches that might be crowding the space of the two, apex branches, and getting it to kind of get the shape that I want right now, because I know that I'm forgiven for my sins literally tomorrow. If I say, damn it, I shouldn't have cut that, like, as long as you're not taking out monster branches, um, your sins will be forgiven. You can go back tomorrow and shape it again a little bit better. Once you get into transition, I think that's when you really need to start kind of like letting it go and quit pinching and stuff. Kevin, do you agree with that kind of that sentiment?
Oh yeah. Once we go into flower, I don't want any breaks or snaps or anything like that. You know, because I've had branches break towards the back of a plant that I didn't see, and then they're down, and then they rot, and then you're rotting onto another bud, and it's like, dang it, and you just want to cut everything out right there because you don't know what's been going on. And I will like what perform more surgery than I need on the tree and remove more than I need to, simply because I know I just want to be safe and keep all the rest. You know, if I just remove a little bit, I'm like, this one, I might save this bud right here. You know, if I save this bud, it looks pretty okay, but it was close to rotting, you know, it was close to that rotting, but cut it off, remove all that junk around there and keep the rest. So it's okay if there's like a branch that does break in flower. If I have a broken branch, you know, if it depends on the severity of it, but typically it's a heavy break because the branches are heavier now. They've stretched out more. They've got more weight on the end, and those snaps are typically worse when there's flower on them. I typically remove the whole thing and just say, let it be, and let the other buds get bigger and chunkier. And I think it's just a good principle to do that. If a limb, you know what, it's a principle in life. Make a clean break. If you got something you know you need to be done with it and burn the bridge and salt the earth because you're never going back. That's a clean break. If you say, well, maybe if I just kind of hang by close and I can still kind of be participating. No. If you want to be done with something and you want to start to heal, make it a clean break and you move on. Same thing with gardening. If something snaps, cut it. It's done. It's like a horse breaking its leg.
Unless it's your leg.
Unless it's my leg, don't do that to me, no, please. But my we're gonna do that to them.
Have you found, like, if there is a break and you got to take off a decent sized branch, is there something that you can kind of put over that wound to speed that up? I know some people in the early days were using like the bigger band-aids and that. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
So, like if the skin, if the outer layer peels down, you know, and the branch is still kind of there, I have pulled it right back up and taped it with electrical tape because electrical tape will stretch, guys. If you use a strong duct tape, you'll have a bulge on the outside of that duct tape, but the electrical tape, it'll stretch for you and it'll even pop if it needs to. So if the skin breaks some, I think I can fix it. If the branch snaps itself, you know, one time I tried to fit. Here's why I went with this. About 3 years ago, I had massive outside plants, just like this year, but they felt like they were monsters. The branches were huge. They were the blueberry squealers. So when I was doing all the blueberry stuff, and I had a branch down low, like a foot from the bottom, a big old branch, just and like it peeled the middle back. You know, you could see the core of the branch. I was like, dang it. And so I just pushed it back up. I duct tape or I electrical taped it all real good. I wired it together. I put all this tape around the bottom, you know, because guys, bugs will get in there and all kinds of stuff. So I was trying to cover it up as best I could. But what happened was in 3 to 4 weeks, that branch hole, it started to get consumed by something and it rotted almost to the top. And I lost probably 75% of the whole thing. And I just had the rest of the top of that plant. And so I was like, Lee, that was terrible. I should have just cut everything out. I could have packed it with, I don't know, a clay or anything like that. Who knows? Cotton with who knows, peroxide on it. Something like that. I don't know. A better idea than try to do that. So removing the break, that plant can heal, but if it's infected in there, it's gonna stay infected. So open that wound up, I guess. Let it heal.
Australian guy from Instagram brought up a decent point. Don't use wire when you're trying to mend those breaks. You have to use something that's going to be a little bit stretchy because what'll end up happening if you do have a break that you can fix, it ends up building a huge knuckle on that break, which ends up making that branch even stronger, which is amazing. It's just another testament to nature there. But use something like Two Men and a Paddle. My boy Ted, he's here in Michigan. He said blue painter's tape would work fine. Something that will break, like twine would be fine, stuff like that, like tape, like Kevin said. But keep all the things that he said in mind, especially if it's like a gaping wound. If it's just a snap, like if the branch snaps, you're trying to like maneuver and it breaks over a little bit. Maybe give it a chance. Give it a day or two. You'll be able to tell if it's done. Sometimes I just let those dangle, and if they that sometimes they come back stronger. But if it's not like a gaping open wound, like where it breaks at the main stem, those are the worst. Because like Kevin said, you get pill bugs in there, especially if they're lower branches. You get nasty stuff in there that'll start eating the plant from the inside out, which is just terrible. So Rick easily said fresh aloe. Like you can put that probably on the ends. It's kind of like a antiseptic, antibacterial type thing. That's horticulturally safe. Kulaya, same thing. Uh, let's talk about supporting the plant, like physically supporting the plant, because
Mhm.
you see a lot of people doing a lot of different things. One thing that I've seen recently is wrapping like what you do with your, or I don't know if you did it around your tomatoes. What did you found it in the dumpster? It's that wire.
Yeah,
It's like
fencing,
chicken.
chicken wire.
Yeah, I've seen people wrap their ganja plants in that. I've seen people. I don't. I would highly recommend not doing that because you're not going to be able to get to those spots to defoliate like we've been talking about without going straight down through the plant.
Yeah.
The way that I like to support, and Kevin, I'll let you chime in after, and Brian too. Um, I like to. I have a supply of bamboo. My father-in-law has a huge like field that just is growing bamboo in it. And he gets these like 12-foot long stakes. You can buy them at garden stores if you need to, but if you can find just a bamboo patch around you, go ask if you can harvest some of those. Just go selectively pick. And I like to build a trellis. I generally do like a 4-post trellis on all, like 2 or 3, 4 feet out from the plant base, like way out from the plant. And then I build like a frame around it, so it's a square, right? And then I build a frame around it, first layer, first tier, so I can kind of floss the heads if I need to. Like I put that in probably in transition period, and it's always too late, so I'm always flossing it down through the branches and stuff like that. But I build a grid system basically and just zip tie or wire it together, and it allows me to make the squares for the head spacing tighter on the lower, and then I can put one up higher because these things are like 12 feet long. So uh, I basically just line those. You can use like they sell actual netting for this too, trellis netting. You can use that as well. But since I have the free bamboo, that's what I use. It works great. Um, Kev, how do you support your plants?
Yeah. So that last green table garden, same idea. I will. I start off with a basic structure of 4 T posts, and they're not 45, but they're 30 or so, 25 angle out a little bit like that. And as it get bigger as it goes to the top, but those T posts are hammered in, and then I'll get probably they're about 20 to 25 foot long bamboo poles, like you're saying. Now these bamboo poles, I probably cut 25 feet off because the longer part it gets kind of skinnier and thinner, and I don't want that. I want this big, thick bottom that's pretty thick way up there, and these things are thick for 20 feet, and it's a huge bamboo grow that's about a mile from my house that I get these things. It's wild. It's out in a field. I don't know how it started. It was here when I moved here. But I will zip tie those bamboo poles to the T posts. I don't dig the bamboo poles in the ground. I just set them on the ground, zip tied to that T post, and those babies go way out. And then I'll start using a yarn, or like Green Table Garden said, a hemp yarn or something like that. There's some yarn that can't weather well. If it rains on it, it'll break pretty easily. So there's certain types of little small thin ropes or something like that. But I'll start about at 6 feet, and I'll go from one to the next to the next to the next, and so it's got this outer lining, this outer little core I'm starting to build. I'll go a foot up. I'll do the same thing, a foot up and a foot up, and I'll just keep doing that as I need to as the plant gets bigger. And then what I do on the inside is I'm taking every plant, and I typically start with that big plant, start with it, and I'll start going tying yarn to it, and then I'll go to another plant, wrap the yarn around it, go to another plant, wrap the yarn, and everybody gets wrapped together, and then the big outer plants get tied to those bamboo poles. And so we've had hard winds and storms already, and that whole thing will move as a bush. And you won't have that outer branch going wah, 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 wah over here and snapping, but everything moves together. But you got to kind of keep tying as things get bigger. You just keep tying. Now, the reason I'm using this yarn is because using netting or anything like that, you always are going to rip the buds off. You're going to damage stuff, pulling the nets out, trying to break the buds and slide them down. With the yarn, it's just a cut and poosh, pull it out, and there's no damage whatsoever. And so that's the method that I've come with.
That's exactly why I like using just the bamboo poles themselves as if and again, it's not the most economical way. I love the way that you're explaining it and use yarn instead of that netting, and I can attest to that. That stuff is a pain in the ass when you have to go harvest or you need to get in there. It's a pain in the butt. So, but I like the bamboo sticks if you've got a huge amount of them that you can grab, because same thing, you can just slide them right out.
Yeah, that's a good deal because again, I've seen professional commercial grows use those nets, and lots of people do. Ain't nothing wrong with it. But whenever I try to take a net off, I'm damaging 15% of that freaking plant, And
Yeah,
if you're going for money, I want nothing damaged. I want 0% damaged. I want nothing dropping on the floor. I want everything in the buckets and frozen. We're going to be smart with it. And those nets just tear things up. Because I promise you, if I'm the owner of the grow and I'm paying some guys to go in there, and I know they all smoke weed, they're all good boys, but when they go in there, they don't care as much as I do. I promise you that. And I want 0% damage. And so I'm going to make sure those boys aren't able to damage my plants. And so I'm going to do it this method here,
When
because
you
you can.
have that, when you have that kind of trustling, especially at the larger grows and stuff, sometimes you have to have these employees up on ladders and they're reaching over, they're trying not to do certain stuff, they're messing up the plants. And I have seen, I probably on one hand seen a variety of people fall off the ladder trying to cut the plastic trellises and stuff, or kind of trip on one and put a nice little indention into the ankle and the skin. So it at this point it is kind of silly to have the fishing line method or the harder plastic trellises and stuff when you can just use the hemp rope. And I've seen with the hemp even you can use fire to kind of like make it a little bit stronger and sturdier.
And let me tell you this, if you did have a nice thin rope that you used, you don't have to go tying knots on everything. All you got to do is just wrap it around one and go to the next and to the next, and you keep a little tension on it. And then when it's done, you can cut whatever end you tied and pull all that back, and you're going to reuse it again. That netting, most of the time you're cutting the netting, you're trying, you're cutting one side and trying to lift it off and all that stuff. So you destroy the netting and all that anyway.
So, when it comes, we've talked about this before, but and you're probably not worrying about it too much right now, but like when it comes to rains and stuff like that, that are winds, and I think that's your biggest concern right now is like these tornadoes and winds, crazy winds. Obviously, the moisture on the leaves plus the wind makes everything worse. But do you what do you do to mitigate issues right now with rain? Are you super concerned about moisture on the plants at this point, or like when do you start to get concerned? When you start seeing bud growth?
Yeah, week 3, if buds are wet, it's over for real. Because if buds get wet, they're going to stay wet for a while because the humidity will be 100% for a few weeks. Starting in September, there's been times where we've had 100-degree days with 100-degree humidity. It rains on us for about an hour, and then we go into a night that's about 92 degrees and about 80% humidity. You're done. You are done. Those buds are over. It might look like you made it through, but what you start to see in a few days is that brownness to those buds, and those hairs have rotted, and they got that fungus on them, and the botrytis and all the other yucky things that will just melt those buds. So that's number one reason I'm always defoliating, heavy defoliation. I don't want big fan leaves touching each other. I need air blowing in there. I need air to move. I can see inside my plants. It is not a big, thick bush that I can't see in. I can see through my plants. because the humidity factor with buds, they just rot them out. But I also have oscillating fans out there. It's rained on them sometimes at night, and it was humid all day long, and we're about to go into another humid day, and it's going to rain a little bit maybe. I'm out there with a fan leaf, just trying to get them dried out as best I can, because I can't beat Mother Nature. I'm just trying to make it as best I can, as long as I can, but she's going to win eventually.
That's where having like a structure around the plant is a benefit, like a structure with even like some sort of roof. So I
Yeah.
learned last year, I have two 10 by 20 greenhouses, frames in the backyard, and I put plastic on them. I keep the sides up and blow. I have fans hanging from everything, power running through them, air blowing everywhere. Regardless of that, I lost so much of my yield last year to powdery mildew. So what I've learned this year is that I'm going to use the frames and keep a top on them for the rain, because when it comes to having to mitigate moisture inside the buds, the best thing, if you have the capability, which in Kevin's condition he doesn't have, and also when you have 100-degree heat with 100% humidity, the top, having an enclosure around you is going to hurt you way more than it's going to help you. So that's one area where if you are able to get like some sort of roof over your small grow, or have a greenhouse that actually is tempered. I mean, obviously you're way advanced and much more advantaged than the Kevins and I's. But I was just thinking, because when I lived out in Southern California, one thing that I dealt with, this was obviously later in flower and stuff, and I'm sorry to retract, even in like seedling phase, you would need to worry and consider having a sunshade, because you do get some intense sun early in the season when the plants are kind of a little bit more sensitive, but also late in the season when they're flowering and budding. If you're in like an Arizona or a SoCal, or even like Central California's been 110 degrees for 2 weeks now. Um, it that is temperature that cooks terpenes, right? So if you're worried about degradation on that level, thinking about sunscreens, thinking, instead of having an enclosure, maybe having some supports for sunscreens so that you can block some of that extra heat and UV rays to try to cool down the conditions. My all the stuff that I grew out in Southern California without sunshade, it was so hot 15 years ago. Can't imagine what it's like now, but 15 years ago it was hay terps all day with the shit that I was growing in the way that we're describing here in kind of an open air. So um yeah,
Uh,
just something to consider.
One thing about that heat, dude, that in Oklahoma, that the one thing that helped. Well, no, I'm gonna say it's two, because it's got to both work together. Two things that will get me through a very, very hot summer. We're having a pretty good summer right now. It's been 100 degrees a few days. Um, is keeping your soil covered. You cannot stress that enough. You have to have your soil covered. And that's, again, why not get it covered using those fan leaves? Just get stuff ripped off, put it down on the ground. It's going to get your roots covered. It's going to get your soil covered, your biology covered. But what you need to do is water at night. Give it a good drink on those hot days, when those weeks are going to be super hot, when those days are going to be super hot throughout a week or two. Make sure you water every night and give it a good watering. And that plant, pretty often, you will see it kind of thrive. What my plants do in high heat, well, what most of my plants I see, cannabis plants I'm referring to, what most of my cannabis plants do in high heat is they start to get a little leggy up top. They start to kind of get a little more of a long length stretch and a little shorter fan leaf put on. And you'd always notice that in the hot heat for a couple weeks, they just kind of chill a little bit like that. But then when it cools down, they're like, boom, put it out again. So So it's noticeable, man. When you're looking at your plants and you're growing a lot throughout the summers, if you pay attention to your seasons and all that stuff, you see these things and you start learning how to react and respond. And just know that when it's hot, if you have dry soil, you're done. You can't. That plant just not going to survive. If you keep your soil wet, it can survive good hot weather.
And that's why, like, the things that we've talked about before, like permaculture type scenarios, thinking about a hugelculture. I
Yeah.
know Sean was less enthused by hugelculture for cannabis and was more about like a dome, kind of just carving out something that's like a basin for water, but being able to stop water and control water, man, that's like the biggest key, especially in those dry runs, which we're in now. I feel like and the only moisture you're gonna get is the type of moisture that is just pounding you. Other than the Northeast, I'm gonna say they're getting like ridiculous amounts of rain out there, soaking rain. So that causes other issues. Luckily, we're in veg right now, so it's really probably only just helping. Um,
Let me say
so
let me say a
yeah,
couple of things.
yeah,
I want to backtrack on a few things. When we're talking about seeds, there are some seed soak solutions out there, and the KNF seed soak solution is about a cup of water. You would have basically about 1 milliliter of or one milliliter of brown rice vinegar, 1 milliliter of fermented fruit juice, and a half a milliliter of OHN. And that would be mixed basically in a cup of water. It's like 500 milliliters, something like that. But that's their seed soak solution. You let your seeds soak in there for 20 minutes or however long you feel like you want to do it. Now, listen, here's what I do: spray your seeds with JMS, spray them with JLF. Before you go cracking them or anything, get the biology all over it. Those seeds have holes in them that biology go in and start to work on that inner bit of the seed. This is all that excuse me, this is all that Jeff Lowenfeld stuff. It's fantastic. Spray your seeds with biology. And then when you get them in the ground, what I do is once that cotyledon shows and then that next leaf shows, I will do a spray of JMS, 1 teaspoon. Yeah, 1 teaspoon, the small one, not tablespoon. 1 teaspoon of JMS or JLF in 32-ounce sprayer, 32-ounce water bottle. Just a basic little sprayer. You don't need the big one if you're doing little seeds and stuff. But once you see that second leaf, the leaf after the cotyledon, that spray solution is good. It works quite well. You start to see them thrive. It's just a little bit of nutrient, a little bit of biology on them, and they respond to it. So I'm saying that because that's free. If you want to make your own OHN, you're going to need about $120. If you want to make your own fermented fruit juice, you're going to need your own fruit and your own and containers. If you're going to need brown rice vinegar, you're going to have to go buy it. So the other JLF is free, JMS is free.
that's why I love Jadam, dude.
Me too.
Jadam is just the shit, and just like um, the common sense, less work approach is just, I'm all about it. And a perfect example is when you were talking about mulching soil, just to go back to that, couple things that I do to get myself through the season with mulch, for free, is I take all the leaves from my yard. If you're ambitious and you have time and want to do the work, just go collect if you're in a area with leafy trees, go collect leaves from the neighbors. In my little hack, go get the ones that are in the brown bags, dude. Those are friggin' easy to throw in the back of the car, man. And then just cut them open, and I would just sift, make sure there's no plastic in there. But other than that, so I like to top my beds with leaves, but then I also keep a stockpile of leaves, and I just like to keep it like dry in the kind of the corner of the garden. And as I need to pull that away, I start, because I promise you, it's gonna be like, whoa, I have so many leaves come May. Come early June, all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, there's no mulch at all here anymore.
Yeah,
So then I start pulling my leaves in, I start using that.
yeah.
But in the meantime, I have been planting over the years things like comfrey, borage, um, marigolds. I didn't plant mugwort, but I have it growing around around my garden, and I just let it grow. I don't fight it, right? So I let these things grow up, and then as I need them, I go chop them out of my. I defoliate those as well, and I use that as a mulch layer on my plants. So, um, just having like a stockpile of mulchy material, right? Like that's why I like letting the little like weed, like the natural weeds grow. Kevin, I showed you a picture. Kevin and Brian, we were texting earlier. Like showed you guys a picture of an amaranth growing in my yard. Don't know where it came from. Probably bird shit. Um, but stuff like that, and like identifying what you have in the garden that's just popping up as a weed, right? Like maybe embrace it for a second, let it grow out a little bit, then chop it when it's neat, right? Like I have pumpkin volunteers growing in my garden right now.
Yeah,
They're
right.
taking up real estate like crazy, and I don't want to grow pumpkins because they take up too much space. It doesn't make any sense for me. But I'm letting it grow because it's not intruding on any of my money crops,
Yeah.
and then I can just go in when I need it. It's going to get bigger and bigger. Just chop it, throw it down literally on a bare patch of soil, and I have mulch for, you'd be surprised, like four or
Wow.
five. Well, yeah, but it's only like probably a week, because it gets chomped down crazy. But then in a week, I have other shit that I can pull, and that's why growing, kind of building this legacy garden is what I would call it. Growing the things that you would love to be able to either make into ferments, or if you're like me and you kind of don't have the time anymore, just chopping it and dropping it and bringing some stuff up from underneath, some nutrition and stuff. Let's get into some questions, boys.
Okay.
Uh, Bobby Hill. Sorry, Brian.
Bobby Hill.
Uh, what's a good IPM for flies? I have a lot of flies in the backyard. They leave black spots on the fan leaves.
They're pooping on those things. Yeah. So this is one of those. I'm assuming backyard. Okay, outside. This is one of those things where it's like you're just gonna sit there and watch what Mother Nature does. Because yeah, I get them. I get those black spots on those leaves also. But there's my wife hates flies. There's flies all over the place. I do compost. I do JLF. Like I'm a fly attractor here on this place, so they don't bother me that much. And if when I see it on the plants, it doesn't bother me. I just kind of like, yeah, that's there. There it is. So that is a terrible answer if you're wanting something to spray on your plants, but I don't think you're going to ever win the battle against flies. Is the thing. I think you'll spray it on, they'll rain off, and you're always going to be applying it. So why not maneuver your own personal self and say, you know what, I can be happy and live with this because I'm that good. That's how I kind of look at it.
So there is a product that is for like it's a biological, it's a parasitic wasp specifically that attacks nuisance flies, and it's marketed towards people with like barns that are like the flies are attacking the horses.
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't know a ton about it, but there is a product you can buy on the market that is like sachets of these parasitic wasps, and if you just look up fly control biological online, you'll find it. Um, though I don't know how they work. I've never really been concerned about the flies, but if it is like a really big issue, then something to consider.
Yeah, good question, Bobby Hill, because other people are wondering the same thing, I promise you.
I accept flies as just a fact of life. Like I open the door, I get 3 flies in my house. It's just the way it goes. It's so annoying, but I have a fly swatter.
Oh yeah.
And I would say if you're really into and you can grow them outdoors, definitely grow them indoors. The pitcher plants go a long way with that. The more that they're fed, the healthier they are, and the more pitchers they're able to grow. So sometimes an infestation will help you grow a ton of pitcher plants real quick.
Yeah,
Just
those are cool.
then they're sweet. They're super cool looking. Brian, you want to grab the next one?
Yeah, from Rick Easley. Do seeds need to cure a bit before planting?
All right, so great question. I've read in a couple books that a seed needs a bit of a curing time for it to pop. Now, I would I've disproved that at least a couple of times by pulling seeds out of a bud that the plant was still growing. I'm like, that seed is done. Yank it out, put it in soil, pop it, just see if just see if it'll germ. And that every time, if not almost every time, it pops. So I don't think it needs to cure or it need now. Some seeds do have to go through a cold spell, like they do have to go through the natural process of a season, of cool and heat. I don't remember all the plants that need that, but they are out there. Cannabis, though, I don't. For me, no, it doesn't. You can pull a seed out of a bud and put it in water and see if that sucker will pop. It has to be mature. It has to be a mature seed in a bud. The bract has to start cracking away and things like that, pretty much. But Jeff Lowenfels, as I referred to earlier, he says that it's a good idea, although it might not need it. It's to germinate. It's a good idea to get biology on those seeds because the natural process of the cannabis plant, if the female grows and she gets pollinated, she produces seeds. Those seeds don't go into a jar. They drop on the ground and they get all into the soil and the dirt and the food web, right? They're right there hanging out. And so they're just covered in all kinds of biology. And pretty much the idea is that makes the seed a healthier seed. So my point is this: if you're a breeder and you're going to store your seeds for a while, why not get your seeds and get a little bit of that dirt from underneath the plant and kind of roll those seeds in that dirt and shake the dirt off and store them that way, right? And that's actually a thing that I tried to do last year, and it didn't hurt anything. And the seeds are popping. It's not enough to tell you if it works well or not, but it's just kind of like, yeah, that is kind of true. They do drop to the ground and get protected, and then they're ready to pop up, the next time. So nature does give them a bit of a cure, but I don't think they need one to grow.
Yeah, follow up for you on how do you store your seeds. I would imagine it goes a little bit deeper than just like putting them in the fridge.
Yeah, so the store, it's all about getting that seed dry. When you pull the seed out of the bud or it falls out, it's going to have oil on it. And often that's why, like, if you've ever tried to press bud that has seed in it, like to get the rosin off of it, the seed oil will burn quickly and you'll get that burnt toasty taste from seeds if you actually press it. And I've done that before years ago. Man, it gets a nasty burnt taste. So the seed itself needs to dry. I've put seeds in vials too soon and they actually molded. I've seen that a couple of times. I saw that happen but earlier. I actually had a guy tell me one time, hey, the seeds are moldy. I was like, man, that happened to me once. Let me send you some more. That's all I can do. So that's happened before. But I get them dried out. I'll get all the green material, which that's the whole big process. They have machines that will do this, but I don't. I hold mine in front of a fan and do that right there. And the seeds drop down and the shaft goes that way. But I'll let those seeds dry, probably in the sun, basically. Just let them get nice and dried out. And don't put them in a closed jar at all. You gotta, when they all get dried out, I'll let them sit out there for probably 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, and then I'll put them in a jar. But that jar has a loose lid. I'm going to let them breathe for quite some time, but they're just in my shed. And guys, this is through winter and heat. I don't go putting them in a refrigerator. Think like nature. What are those seeds doing when they fall to the ground? They're going through heat and freezing. They're just going through the cycle of nature. So I leave mine in the environment of nature, but they are stored in a way they're going to preserve much longer because they're dried out. And then, after a couple of months, I'm like, yeah, they're good. I'll close the lid because I don't want to spill them. I want that lid closed just because I need to save them, but they need to get dried out.
And then they need to be in a dark spot after that, right?
Well, mine are always in a dark spot. I don't ever have them out in the sunlight. The sunlight is always going to degrade whatever it's shining on. So yeah, it's definitely not a good idea just to keep anything out in the sunlight that you're wanting to last a while. So yeah, a dark spot is a very smart place to have them. I'm sure you could preserve them in a humidified room and treat them like a cigar, but I don't do that. I'm hanging out with nature, and like I said, I'm gonna let them just go through the heat. If they make it, they make it. It's like evolution. It's like those one seeds are the ones that made it. Okay, I'll take those. The rest didn't pop. Fine, whatever.
This is from Instagram, so shout out to people who are still watching on Instagram and everything. Is the leaf thing just a general way just to select for vigor?
I,
And I think he's talking more in the earlier spots, the
you
defoliation and
remember
stuff.
what he's talking about?
Yeah, I think we were talking about like is the leaf that like I was talking about 3 finger, 5 finger, 7 finger, maybe. I think I'm gonna go with that. I think that's what he's talking about. Yeah, that is definitely a general way to see what plant is more vigorous than other plants. Because again, if you got a plant that goes 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, that baby is pumping. Or he's in good soil to begin with. You're probably not gonna have that in a pot, and it just needs room, man. When you get in soil and you get outside, these things can happen. So I always look for that. If you're breeding, often you'll get a big girthy sucker that turns into a male too. So be prepared. Males get big just like females get big. It's just it doesn't tell you anything, but that the genetic in that plant wants to grow.
From young Deso, do you know anyone that plants in August for a direct 12-12 cycle?
I don't. I'm sure you could try it. I would in Oklahoma. You would have August, September, and October, and then maybe a little November.
There, up north in Michigan, there's spots along the lake where the lake, where it will have kind of its own atmospheric like biome, like so I do know of people that will plant a second harvest in that area doing exactly that. Go straight into a 12-12 and they're harvesting like December. Which is crazy to me. It like you can't do that here where I live. But 3 hours north of here, if you're on the lake, you have literally and if you obviously have to be specific on your genetics. I feel like growing in such a cold climate with such limited sunlight, and I think your expectations should also be aligned, because yeah, you're not getting good weather. It really just boils down to seasons, especially in Michigan. It
You need
happens in
those
October.
thug girls, man, out there going through that.
Yeah.
That thug life.
So I do know of people doing it, but it's a tough go, man. You're kind of basically starting at a tough. By the time they're getting cranking, you're running into like very tough environmental conditions.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what's the payoff also for all the work that you're about to do for this plant? You know, how big is it going to get? How much bud are you going to get off of it? How much work are you going to be doing with it?
Now, if you're in Southern California where the weather's always perfect, maybe totally different conversation. That's why I'd love to get somebody on here from like a desert climate, to that can talk on some of this stuff. That'd be a fun conversation.
It was a follow up from that same individual about do you think it's possible to direct seed in August with the 12-12? Just go check stability in the seed stock.
Yeah, I mean, you can see a lot of things with the plant that's just going to grow for 2 months. You can, you know, for well, let me continue. You're going to see the leaf structure. You're going to see if there's any mutations. Pretty much from a very early stage, you're going to see mutations that can happen in veg. You're going to see node spacing. You're going to see finger development on the leaf. You're going to see stretch. All kinds of things that we could talk about in a veg plant that you could look at. So yeah, if you're wanting to breed, I pop seeds all the time just to see if they pop. If not, Kid Mac, who's one of my friends, that we do this, Fat Beer Pothead, Scissor Tail Savalus, we're just popping seeds all the time of the different things and just saying what was the pop ratio on these things, because these are guys I do some collabs with and we just want to see what a ratio is of seed popping. We're not even going to grow them. Yep, they pop. All right, chunk them. And that's kind of what you do sometimes.
From Think Chair, some y'all need to put insect netting up. Butterfly egg bonanza all over my autos in SoCal.
I don't even know what a butterfly
That's
egg banana.
that's
Oh,
that's the
butterfly egg.
green that's the greenhorn worms probably, or just those green worms, whatever they
I thought it
are.
was called a bonanza.
Um, and
What?
yeah, that I had the same experience this time. Well, not with autos, but with uh, regulars, photos. They You have to spray with BT Kurstaki is the best and really only way to handle those. Even insect netting is not going to work. Um, I would just do like a foliar, and even if you're into flower, which it seems like you probably are, uh, I would still hit those with BT Christaki, and I've used BT Monterey is one product. The other product I've used is called Thurigicide, and it's a liquid BT for caterpillars. It'll be specific what it's aimed at, but BT Kirstaki is what it's called, the actual strain.
And final question here for I think he corrected this at the. I didn't save that part, but I
Just
don't think he
slugs and
meant
snails.
snake. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He wasn't asking about snakes.
Someone had a
Just
good answer.
Yeah, there was lots of answers underneeth that.
Yeah, someone had
Why
some good
don't you post
answers
some of
there.
those? Could you post some of those, Brian?
I
These guys
think
know their stuff.
I think with young seedlings, if you need to go with a product like a going with like a light application of a sluggo, it's not gonna really screw up like outdoor soil biology that much, in my opinion. I don't really like the idea of using sluggo for potato bugs or gray roly polies when it comes to indoor gardening in a closed loop, especially when you're doing living soil. Just to clarify that, and the reason I don't like it is because Sluggo does, if you read through the SDS sheet on it, it does affect uh, worms. So that's why I would recommend a light application, very infrequently, and I would apply it like when you know there's not going to be rain for a bit.
So once say cucumbers, squash, crushed up, eggshells around your plants, annoy snails and slugs. Probably because of sharp. Jadam recipe for slugs: 3 ounce castle soap, 2 teaspoons sodium hydroxide. Melts them. Spray at night, only for 3 nights in a row. Pow, stonemason bringing home the bacon.
I was gonna say that sounds like a tried and true. This is from experience. So,
Yeah, good job, stonemason.
yeah. And that is it, guys. So tried and true. We're pretty good at keeping this within a relatively shorter time frame. And honestly, man, Kevin, you're giving away gold bars as always. With
They
Mark
deserve it.
directing us with some insightful questions. It's nice
Yeah,
to kind of like, and I think Mark obviously is seeing this, like, kind of give you the ball, man, and then you just kick it down the hill. And
big
it's like,
job.
wow, this is
Fun.
pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah, good questions, everybody. Appreciate those. Those are a lot. That was a lot of fun. I learn all the time. I don't know everything because I don't need to know. Just like Stone Mason, he posted some stuff. Great job, thank you. I didn't need to know that. I needed to hang out with Stone Mason for a minute. That's all I needed to do.
We're not necessary. I don't know about you guys, and I do know about you guys, but I'm not just here to preach. Like I'm here to learn, not just from Brian and Kevin, but from everybody on this.
Yeah,
So huge shout out. Really appreciate you guys. And if you're not always learning, I feel like I feel like you're approaching it wrong. Um, Especially when it comes to nature. Light bulbs just go off, and you just Kevin with just these crazy ingenious products, just coming from a different uh, just place. I mean, I don't know where you pull these things. The blacks and the white OHN. I love it.
yeah.
The turkey tail, the turkey tail IMOs, the
Yes.
acorn IMOs, using
The
what you have.
Bukashis, the
Um,
Bokashis.
so appreciate that people don't take things that we're saying as contentious at all in any way, shape, or form, because it really is just all about doing what works for you. Some people live in southern this country is amazing. The world is amazing, and everywhere you live is going to be its own environmental biome. So um, keep that always in mind. Take what we say, and hopefully you can apply it. And I appreciate the lessons learned here tonight because I learned a bunch of stuff. Always learning from you, Kev. What do you
Yeah.
have? What do you have going on? I know you got your. Are you sold out on the event coming up?
I haven't talked to Jordan. He's doing the Pestapalooza, I believe it is right now. I think that's the one he's doing. But I talked to him about a week and a half ago, and he's like, "I'm not gonna be able to talk to you for just a few days, and then we'll get to chatting about it." So I know that we probably sold 12 tickets. We probably sold more than that by now. But what we're referring to is the class that's on October 19th in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Growcast and OK Calix have joined up. We're going to put an autumn immersive organic gardening class. And I'm going to teach you all the things that I do here. We're going to go out into the woods. You're going to learn where to look, what to look under, what to bring back, how to process it down, how to use it to create another input, just all kinds of things. It's just going to show you the whole ball of organic goodness that you can find just by walking out in the woods, just by seeing what is on the ground, what is growing in the tree, what's about to fall down, what has fallen down, what's underneath that bark. Do you see any leaf mold? The list goes on and on of what you can do and how you can process it and how you can bring it back and make your garden grow. And that's what that class is going to be about. We're going to have a lunch provided. We're going to get to hang out and chat. I'm going to be showing you all kinds of cool organic things to do in this class. It's in Tahlequah, October 19th. Go to growcastpodcast.com. You'll find the classes there. It's the OK Calix class, growcastpodcast.com. Go check out okcalixshop.com. I got some genetics up. I got some bundles up. Just go look. Soon I'll have some. After fall, I'm going to have a bunch of films I'm going to release. I release the films in my bundles. Like they come as gifts to you. When you buy bundles, I put films and regs in there. And so you're getting stuff that I haven't even searched sometimes. But whenever I grow it outside, Kid Mac or Fatbeard Pothead's grown stuff, when we're able to see it and we're able to see some results, then I usually put stuff up online. But in the fall, I'll have some new films coming up. But go check out okcalixshop.com. Brian, how about you, my friend? What you been up to this week?
Just trying to get orders out, man. To be honest, like when it's so hot everywhere, I'm sure you guys are feeling the pressure on that as well. The customer says next week, and then the next week it's hotter than it was the week before. So what do you tell them? Are we gonna wait again? And then shipping out that at volume is something that we are trying to learn in real time. So those are the kind of issues. They're good issues to have, but behind the scenes, if you guys even have recommendations, I'd love to hear it.
You sound like the
Because
dude that needs to go on Tiger Shark. Like, I got more work than I can handle. I need more people. How do I do it?
yeah, how do I scale is probably
Shark
the
Tank.
biggest thing. Yeah.
What'd I say?
Tiger Shark.
Tiger Shark.
That
I
sounds
know, I
way
know what you
cooler.
meant. Hey, that's how stoners are, man. We're not gonna.
I'm asking you to come on my new show.
If I know what you're talking about, I'm not gonna correct it. I was just like, hey, that guy's stoned.
You knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction, Mark.
What about you, Mark?
Oh, I definitely feel your pain when it comes to the heat, man. Like I don't have nearly the volume of orders that you have, Brian, but it pains me deeply, deeply. I don't know why necessarily. I do want to get these orders out, but it pains me deeply to have to kick the bucket another week. And I have orders that are trying to go to Southern California, Central California, Sacramento, Arizona, where the temperatures are just like 110 degrees. And even if you even if you ship that on a hold at a location, um, it's still a big risk, and it does cost a lot of money because, as you know, Brian, the packaging material is really what costs a lot. That's the insurance policy. So if you can't rely on the insurance policy, then it's really tough. And it's costly too. So I know how that compounding order thing works. I feel your pain on that for sure, and I'm still trying to figure it all out myself. But we still got some tie dyes up on the site, mibeneficials.com, and have a great assortment of springtails still available. Cultures are amazing. You know, like just really refining my art on raising these things, and having some successful shipments to people like you, Brian, like these bigger orders where the temperatures are a little bit warm. That's what really keeps me like, okay, we can do this. You know what I mean? Really appreciate everybody's support here, and it's been a great show, dude. I love catching up on things that are very relevant with what's going on in probably everybody's garden right now. And I think that's where we'll kind of keep the course of the show moving forward over the next few weeks until probably harvest time, just because it'd be nice to get this memorialized into a show where we can all kind of go through it together. And I hope that people stay on board and keep asking these awesome questions, because it really does keep us thinking and keeps us learning. So
Yeah, after your bud drops, after you cut your buds, y'all, then it's a whole world of making inputs because the leaves are going to fall. You're going to be able to look in the woods. There's going to be things on the ground. It's a whole new world of input making and getting your soil ready for next year and getting bigger plants going outside and indoors. Learn how to make soil that works indoors also, y'all.
looking forward to taking that journey with you guys.
Yeah.
Happy Friday, everybody, and until next week, keep it organic.